Well, guys, thank you very much, and welcome everybody to the last PRCA B Corp Group event of 2020. And what a completely average and normal year it has been for all of us, right? So, look, we all know, and some of us actually have experienced sort of firsthand some of the horrors that we've seen this year. And it would be all too easy for us to kind of focus in on that sort of the doom and gloom. But actually, what we're going to try and do this evening is to sort of take some encouragement and a focus on something that I believe we've seen during the course of 2020 as we've been faced with this adversity, which is actually the power of movements. And I think this is so important for us to kind of focus in on this, given the fact that we are part, or we certainly have an interest in this great movement that is B Corp. So I'm just going to sort of set the scene a bit for tonight. While it may feel as though we have taken a few steps back in 2020, I actually want you to sort of reconsider. Movements have accelerated what I think many people on this call are hopeful of, some extraordinary changes in society. We've seen Black Lives Matter forging action and elevating equality to a level that we've never really seen before, with some real action behind it. We've seen the Green New Deal start to enter into mainstream language, mainstream lexicon, politicians, organizations, the public demanding to reset our economy, an unjust economy perhaps, a carbon-hungry economy, certainly. We've seen footballers go from heroes on the pitch to human rights icons off of it. And we've seen some extraordinary elements. We've seen the US in one breath announce that it's leaving the Paris Climate Agreement, and within a couple of days announcing that it will be very shortly rejoining it. We've seen businesses affect change. We've seen politicians fall in line, and I think we should all be quite proud of the fact, certainly, that the part the B Corp movement has played in all of this. So, which is why tonight should be an encouraging and largely positive event. We are going to briefly review the progress, I think, that we made in 2020, and importantly, though, take stock of how we can turn that progress into real action, into a real moment for 2021. And to guide us, I'm delighted to say that we've got two fantastic speakers for you tonight. So we've got Chris Turner, who's Executive Director at B Lab UK. So Chris, you're going to be giving that B Corp perspective and what's been achieved this year, but also, what are your focus areas for next year, and how people can get involved in that journey. And then we've got Anna Geyer, founder of Greenhouse PR. And I've got to say this, because I've got to plug this definitely. They're also recent winners of the Best Specialist PR Agency at the PRCA National Awards. Huge congratulations for that, Anna. And Anna's set up an organization, a PR agency, that's actually one of the first to be B Corp certified, which I think is a tremendous, gives you a tremendous sense of how far ahead of the game Anna is in terms of the thinking and the approach that Greenhouse is taking, and it's a deeply important perspective to have with us as well this evening. So a few sort of just one or two housekeeping things. If we could keep the questions to the chat channel, I think that would be great, because what I will try and do is, Chris and Anna are going to spend about sort of 10-15 minutes giving us a great insight, taking us through their talks. I will try to the best of my ability, capture the questions and then put them forward to our speakers so that we can go through them methodically. If I do miss any questions that haven't been raised, or that you do want to sort of ask something direct, please do jump in during those Q&A sessions. So hopefully we're going to have a good sort of 45 minutes of interesting chat and encouragement and positivity and action for the coming year. So first off, Chris, I'll hand over to you, mate, and you can give us this perspective from the B Corp side of things.
Thanks, John. I appreciate that. And yeah, a great sort of tone to set some, launches in with some positivity, which is exactly, I think, what we're all feeling the need for. I hope you can all hear me all right. I'm actually at the office today, and some people have decided to have a dance party in the office next door. So if you can hear some thumping bass, that's what it is, and I'll try and speak over it. Yeah, so anyway, really nice to kind of be here with this group. I think it's amazing that you've all been getting together to talk about B Corps and the movement, and to explore it a little bit more, and obviously with some B Corps as well, to give you the sort of flavor and taste of what it all means from the horse's mouth. And yeah, delighted to come along, I suppose, and give you, I suppose, a sense of what it feels like to be at the sort of the hub of this, the spokes that make up this movement. And what I thought I might do is, if you'll indulge me, I suppose, is to just reflect very briefly on sort of the journey that's brought us here. B Lab UK has just had its 5th birthday in September. And so we are in the process of putting together a bit of a celebration for our B Corp community. And in the process, we ourselves are kind of reminding ourselves of some of the big milestones that have taken place over those 5 years, and the story of growth that exactly as you're saying, John, gives us a real feeling of positivity, despite everything that's going on and the sort of the struggles that people are going through. Right now, as things stand in the UK, we're at about 425 B Corps in the UK, which represents, it's about over £4 billion worth of turnover there represented. It's over 20,000 people working for B Corps in the UK. So we're really kind of proud of how far we've come in only 5 years. And looking back in 2015, it was our co-founders, Shah and James, sort of saw the model. Started in the US back in 2006-7. They saw the model. They saw that there were already businesses that were embracing the principles of B Corps, and being forces for good, which is, the B Corp mission. And thought, right, this is time. The time is right. The UK is right for the B Corp movement to really kind of flourish. And they were absolutely right. And their timing, I guess, was perfect, because what it meant was that between 2015 and 2018, so in those first 3 years, there was a founding cohort of about 60 B Corps in 2015, and then there was sort of year upon year of building a really solid foundation. So a really solid foundation of businesses that were having a positive impact, that were kind of proving the model for what business can do as a force for good, and proving the fact that you can be a force for good as a business while also growing and flourishing as a business. So in that time, you had a real kind of evolution from the very early adopters, as you're describing Anna there, really ahead of the curve, and onto this stuff early on, through to towards the end of that period, so 2018. You had much more mainstream businesses and much bigger businesses starting to come into the movement. And I think it was in 2018 that Innocent joined the movement as a sort of first kind of, I suppose, hundreds of millions of pound sort of turnover business, and quite a significant kind of step change there. And so what we've done there ever since is cultivate a community that really represents the diversity of businesses in the UK, big, small, all kinds of sectors, which is, absolutely one of the joys of my job, is being able to work with, that variety of businesses. So you had those first few years, building that foundation, proving that this is a model that works. And then from the start of last year, some of the stuff that you were just talking about, John, that we've felt this year, with whether it's the kind of the popular movements, I say popular movements, the kind of citizen-led movements, like whether it's Black Lives Matter or whether it's, the climate movement, lots of that stuff started really at the beginning of last year with a real kind of public awakening, particularly on the climate and the first Extinction Rebellion rebellions in London at the beginning of last year. And from the start of last year, it's just been like someone strapped on a jetpack, really. And we've experienced a huge kind of uptick in interest and demand for B Corp certification. And that's like tangible, businesses coming to us and saying, we want to get certified, how does it work? But also, whether it's sort of smaller businesses who are close to certification themselves, or whether it's CEOs of FTSE 100 companies who are coming to us and saying, we need to be more like B Corps. We know we're not going to be able to certify anytime soon, but how do we get started on this journey? And all that's happening because of the context, because the world is changing, because the problems that have been exacerbated by the old way of doing business, the shareholder primacy, as a sort of as a kind of orthodoxy of our system, that obviously that's become more apparent, the harm that's been doing. And so really, the second chapter of this story from last year and this year is really the B Corp movement worldwide, I should say. Sort of, I've never know what the right sort of metaphor is. We're not quite riding the wave because we were sort of there before. So now we're sort of catching the wave as it comes along. I don't know, but I'm not a surfer, as you can tell.
We'll get Finisterre on the call next, Chris.
Yeah, exactly.
And they can give that perspective.
Pro tips, yeah. But the wave is there. The wave of change obviously was coming last year. People recognizing that the economic system isn't working. And this year, it's a change that's profoundly rooted in communities and people as well, because they're experiencing through the lens of the COVID crisis what it means if a business is rooted in community, taking care of the environment, other stakeholders, and a business built around relationships rather than around transactions. And so people are feeling the benefits of that in a very real and immediate sense. And so what perhaps last year was a conversation for the activists, or a sort of esoteric, what is our economic system kind of conversation, this year evolves into a very real, tangible conversation about how can I tell who are the goodies and who are the baddies, how can I tell, who to shop from, who to invest in, who to work for. And now that's where we're kind of moving into with the B Corp movement is a much more sort of widespread recognition that B Corp is a signifier of those things, but also a challenge for us, which is now we're looking to next year, which is how do we take what are the leaders, absolutely the leaders, and recognized as leaders, well beyond the B Corp community when it comes to business for good. And how do we take this community of leaders, 425 this year? I don't want to make any promises, but we're looking at 600, 700 by the end of next year. And how do we take that and how do we affect change when it comes to the mainstream of business? How do we affect the systems level change that we need in order to urgently address these massive challenges? And that as a movement, but obviously also as B-Lab UK, as the sort of conveners, if you like, of the movement, how do we affect that change? And so when we think about that, there's sort of two primary kind of areas of focus for us next year when it comes to harnessing the leadership of the B Corp community to advocate for wider change. And the first of those, I think, is, and this, by the way, is alongside all the stuff that, we got an amazing team at B-Lab UK. There's 9 of us, and amazing work goes on every day in terms of bringing new businesses into the movement, helping businesses understand how to measure and manage their impact, all the way through to how we engage and bring together and convene B Corps, create spaces for them. This year, that the team has done amazing things, just sort of creating, whether it's creating kind of open spaces to have difficult conversations about race, whether it's quickly having to sort of pivot and figure out how the hell we do our B socials in a virtual world, where everything social is more challenging. So that work all continues. But next year, I think what we're getting much more deliberate about is how we harness the B Corp community to really advocate for what we call on what we call collective action. So where B Corps can come together and can demonstrate best practice and leadership on specific areas. And next year, there's a really obvious example here, which is COP and climate action. And COP26 happening in Glasgow, hopefully next November, is a huge opportunity for the UK, specifically the UK B Corp community, to showcase its leadership on climate action. And the global B Corp community started on this at the end of last year by bringing together hundreds of B Corps at the COP in Madrid to make or to showcase their net zero commitments. We want to take that well beyond in Glasgow next year with a really ambitious commitments from across the UK B Corp community on net zero. And we also want to bring together some real kind of thought leadership in terms of the kind of surrounding issues there. Yes, net zero is a really tangible, punchy commitment at the heart of it, but what about issues surrounding climate justice? What does it mean for the UK more broadly on the world stage to have a leading community of businesses making net zero commitments in post-Brexit Britain and all of that sort of context as well? So climate's a really obvious example. I think the JEDI lens, so equity, diversity, inclusion lens, is going to continue to be a really kind of core part of what we do, and bringing together B Corps to have difficult conversations and then share those beyond the B Corp community is a really key piece of the work that we're going to do. But we've got a very kind of mature now network of working groups within the B Corp community that are going to start really sharing and distributing a lot of amazing best practice across the work that we do. And that ranges from sort of, we've got a people and culture working group, which dives into a lot of the equity, diversity, inclusion work. We've got a circular economy working group. We're working across a whole range of issues, and they're all going to come to bear on this collective action work. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing, which is going to be a massive focus for us next year, is policy. And so you all know, I know you all know, because you're part of this group, you all know that B Corps do these two things in order to become a B Corp. They measure manage their impact on one hand with the assessment and get a verified score. And then they make a legal change on the other hand to commit in their governing articles to stakeholder governance, essentially, as a concept. We're launching a campaign from January onwards to advocate for a change to Section 172 of the Companies Act, which again, talk about sounding esoteric, but that is directors' duties. And what that will do is it will establish a mandatory triple bottom line purpose for every company in the UK. So the directors of every single company in the country will be responsible for equally considering people, planet, and profit alongside one another when they make decisions. And what that effectively does is it raises the bar, it raises that kind of floor of what we expect from all businesses in terms of their responsibility. And it essentially means that from our perspective as B Corp fans, it means I probably go beyond being a fan, but as B Corp advocates, what it means is that every single business in the UK would immediately fulfill the legal requirement of being a B Corp. They're committed in their governing articles by law, by default, to considering all stakeholders in their decision making. And that, as far as we're concerned, is a massive systems level lever that we can pull to really kind of move the needle on this stuff. And next year being an amazing opportunity to do that, where we've got what I like to think of, and this counts within the B Corp movement and well beyond, we've got a real perfect storm here. We've now got the second biggest B Corp community in the world and the fastest growing. So an amazing community of businesses totally committed to being a force for good and showcasing their leadership well beyond the community. We've got an academic community which is world leading in terms of modeling what an economy within which business can be a force for good looks like. We've got a political scene where we don't have a general election for 4 years and a government which is taking bold action, which I don't think anybody thought was possible at the beginning of this year. And then we've got what globally speaking is a very conscious, let's call it, you guys know, conscious consumerism, you know, popular movements, very, very enlightened citizenship on these issues. And you know, you mentioned a few of them. You know, the talk here, whether it's on climate and Green New Deal, is well ahead of where it is in lots of places. Marcus Rashford and his campaign, you know, just shows how quickly, you know, these issues can take root with the public here. And so my final note, really, as I've been rattling on for far longer than I should have done, my final note here is to say that, yeah, on this kind of tone, with this tone of positivity that you set, John, I think this is, the UK is the place, and 2021 is the time for some really kind of really dramatic action on this stuff to kind of scale the B Corp movement and scale beyond the B Corp movement to affect the kind of change we want on a broader kind of systems change level, which is hugely exciting.
Chris, fantastic. And what a way to kick off tonight with two sort of enormous goals for the coming year. I'll kick off a couple of questions. So you mentioned around the development of best practice, which I think anyone who's been part of the B Corp community, it's been incredibly useful to share ideas from like-minded organizations. But I think it's also been encouraging to see B Corp make things, even such as the assessment tool, publicly, freely available. I was just wondering whether that best practice that's in development will be shared beyond just the B Corp community, firstly.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the things we have to do, and it's a you know, I think, you know, one of the things that's implicit in what I was just talking about really is, I suppose, the understanding that you know, we don't have time to certify every business in the world as a B Corp in order to affect this change and stop business from, you know, ultimately harness business to solve these huge problems. And so what that means is that B Corps are always going to be the leaders and the best of the best. And so our job as B Lab is to basically make sure that every other business can benefit from that leadership, can be inspired by it, and can also learn from that best practice. So at a very strategic level, that's got to be a priority for us as a movement. But yes, in practice as well, that's definitely something we're spending a lot of time on. And that's, you know, even funnily enough this morning, you know, talking about our kind of resourcing and planning for next year, we're thinking about how we gear up more effectively on that side of things to be able to package and distribute the stuff that's produced from those working groups. There's a good example happening right now on the climate side in terms of our net zero working group producing some kind of guides and best practice, you know, a bit of a playbook around net zero commitments. And so we're talking through how that gets to a much wider audience.
Brilliant, because I think, you know, one of the challenges that we're going to face is that, and sorry for taking a very ever so slightly cynical view, is that you know, when with some organisations, when you say triple bottom line, they'll mean I didn't know profit could be repeated 3 times. So it's important that is kind of shown the way as to what even that is, how to kind of structure and run an organization from that perspective. I guess also there's the other question I was just going to put to you around this, Chris, is it's fantastic to hear how more organizations are looking towards B Corp as a form of certifying their intent, which I think is how I always tend to describe it, is that, you know, you need to have the actual the drive and the intent, and so Anna, I think you're going to be talking about this as well. But is there a concern, and how do you filter through those that might see this as a performative action rather than as a genuine action?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, and one that we get it, you know, we get a lot, and I think it's a good, you know, it's a good question to address early on, because so the first thing is obviously you know, let's say in theory a business can certify as a B Corp even if they're doing it just as a performative, i.e. rather, even if their primary motivation is for this to be a kind of, you know, a branding exercise. That can happen, and I'm sure of a 425 B Corps there might be a couple in there that have done that. But the vast majority are there because they believe in business as a force for good and they believe in the mission of the movement. And the proof is really in the pudding there, in the sense that I think, those of you on the call who have been through the assessment can probably testify to the fact that if you started doing that and didn't really believe that this was the right thing to do, you'd quite quickly think that there are more effective ways of branding yourself as
most definitely
whatever it is, than becoming a B Corp just for that sake. So it's baked in, I think, that if you're going through what is the pain, I think, in many cases, of becoming a B Corp, because you not only have to do a huge amount of measuring your impact, but then you've got to make all the improvements to reach the standard, and then you've got to recertify every 3 years, during which time the standards have got harder.
Yes. We know that, Chris, thanks.
Yeah just to unsettle your sleep tonight, but so it's hard. That's the main answer to the question, John. It's hard. And so unless you believe it's the right thing to do, you're not going to get through. And I say, when businesses come to us, I will always say very early on in the conversations, you have to believe this is the right thing to do. Otherwise, we're not gonna make it to the end of this kind of journey together.
Yeah, I've got a question here from Deepa Mary, who's sort of asked whether there is a thought around a sort of pro-environment or B Corp logo for consumers to recognise organisations. Obviously, I mean, there is a B Corp logo, and we're seeing it more and more kind of appear on packaging and products and things such as that from a sort of consumer perspective. I was wondering, Chris, is there plans to build on that as the awareness of B Corp movement increases? Are we going to be seeing more sort of guiding points, more sort of stamps of approval from B Corp come through in the consumer world?
So I think so. First of all, just in terms of the stamp itself, I mean, we're very kind of I guess careful and protective of the B Corp stamp, right? That's it. We're not gonna suddenly start offering sort of green specific or sort of I suppose diluting in any sense the clarity of that single mark. So that and so having said that, or rather despite that, and that being a very clear mark, I think it's fair to say that over the 15 plus years of the B Corp movement, we haven't been very deliberate about building consumer awareness. Our organizations as B Labs are very much kind of B2B. We certify and then that's kind of where we stop. I think that will change. I think it needs to change as we certify bigger brands, particularly. That's the most obvious way of getting the logo in front of more consumers, is to certify big brands. And so, it's going to change, and it's going to mean that we're going to have to get a little bit hotter on our sort of managing our IP and stuff from our perspective. But it's a really exciting opportunity, I think, for the B Corp movement. 2021 and beyond is to get more consumers recognizing it. And it's something that I mentioned, our consumer marketing working group. So some of the biggest consumer facing B Corps within the community do come together and they do talk about that stuff. And with them, we're hoping to go a lot further in terms of kind of creating best practice for how B Corps get the logo on products, packaging, websites, all that sort of stuff, so that we can really go through them to get it in front of as many people as possible.
Brilliant. Thank you. I guess, Chris, just to wrap up, I'm sure there's people on the call who are considering B Corp or potentially sort of looking just for further information. What would you say would be their first port of call? Where should they go to sort of get that first step?
So the first thing I would do is apologize for our website. Which,
well, you've got a lot of branding and comms consultancies on here.
That's why. So this will be particularly, I feel like I need to make that apology. We're working on that, and it is so. The serious point there is that it's not immediately apparent how to get started on this journey. Very simply, the easiest way to very quickly get your head and hands around what the meat of the certification is to go to our assessment. So search for the B Impact Assessment or click through from the B Corporation website, create an account, as you say, John, completely free, completely open, that framework. We're not going to look at it, nothing, you know, we don't get involved until you press submit, which is much further down the line. So you can just go on, you can play around, you can invite colleagues on to collaborate with you and just sort of scratch around and get a bit under the surface of what the assessment looks like, what might be involved for your business. I think that's the best way to get started. And then if you have questions, there is a lot of information on the website. It's not always the most intuitive, but there's a lot on there. And of course, you can always just get in touch with others. If something isn't making sense, you can just drop us a line.
Brilliant. Sorry, I am just going to ask one final question, because there's a couple of that have just come, late entries that have come through. Andy Green, good to have you on the call, mate. Andy's asked this, and actually it's an incredibly important question now, which is around, is there any plans to include sort of purposeful behavior, especially in terms of things like fake news and the sort of the making sure that we're not spreading misinformation? I think perhaps, Anna, you were on the same event yesterday, was AltCop yesterday, that was being run, where actually misinformation was a real distinct threat to solving things like the climate crisis. Are there any plans for fake news, misinformation, good behavior when it comes to comms practices to be incorporated into sort of B Corp certification? That's a question that's come up a couple of times.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. So the honest answer is I don't know whether that's a specific thing that's being explored. The quick bit of background here is that the standards, which are, they underpin the assessment, and that's where all the questions are designed, are continually being developed. So a new edition, a new version is released every 3 years. We're going to release version 7 at the beginning of 2022. And is that version 8? Anyway, I lose track. And so that will, all of those standards, as I say, they get harder. The bar's raised as our expectations and best practice gets more exacting. And of course, as new issues rise to prominence. So you can imagine that in that next version of the assessment, there's going to be a lot more in there on the equity, diversity, inclusion stuff. There's going to be a lot more in there on health and well-being. There's probably going to be a lot more in there on fake news and transparency. I'm not sure. One thing I would also say, and this is getting a bit into the nitty-gritty of the assessment, so I can spare you much detail here, and obviously feel free to get in touch. But we do have within the assessment what are called impact business models. And this is where businesses are awarded, if you like, kind of bonus points for doing things which have a distinctly positive impact on the world. And a good example of a business here in the kind of thing you're talking about would be the Guardian Media Group, for example, get an impact business model for being a kind of independent media organization. And so there is already some things in the assessment there that kind of recognizes, the value of independent, sort of news and transparency. So there's some stuff there, but I think it's a great question, and I'm going to dig around into this a bit. So yeah, definitely a good.
Brilliant. Well, look, Chris, thank you so much for this insight. I think we're all very encouraged, certainly spurred on about what we could potentially achieve for next year. Some deeply important work that can take place at the most opportune moment, as you said, with COP coming along, and just with the way of the sway of public momentum right now. Thanks so much for sharing your insight, answering some of those questions, and we look forward to the coming year from a B Corp perspective that hopefully will benefit everyone.
Brilliant. Thank you, John.
Thanks, Chris. Our next speaker is Anna. Anna's the founder of Greenhouse PR, and Anna, I'm going to see whether my technology skills are up to scratch by sharing your slide deck. So bear with me 1 second.
Sure, I could sort of introduce a little bit while you're finding the slide.
Fabulous, thank you.
So hello everybody, lovely to be here. Really good to be amongst people within the PR industry who are interested in the B Corp movement. And I guess the first thing to say is that we are real advocates of the B Corp. We've been in it now for about 4 or 5 years since the beginning, but we really believe that being part of a movement for change is incredibly encouraging, and that working alongside people who have the same sort of values and views as you is something that actually really enhances the business as well. And I suppose what I'd like to talk to you today is a little bit about Greenhouse and how we have made sure that the B Corp and our mission runs throughout our entire business, but also just to give you some encouragement about ways we might like to think about 2021 and ways that we have got through lockdown in a purposeful way that might be encouraging to others and might give you thoughts and ideas of what you also could do. I guess also the other thing is to say and to mention that we did get Specialist PR Consultancy of the Year this year at the PRCA, for which we are delighted. But the reason why we've been wanting to do that for the last 3 or 4 years is we really want to try and challenge and change the PR industry. I don't think there's ever been a better time and a more opportune time to be a PR and comms professional. And we need as many brilliant comms professionals on climate change and creating a better society at the moment than we ever have. And it's a time in our lives as PR people that we can make a huge difference. By brilliant comms, we can scale the change we need to see. So what an immense and brilliant time to be talking about it, but also what a brilliant time for us to have got that award, because hopefully it will show to other people that you can be purposeful, sustainable and profitable at the same time. So anyway, that's the reason why we were very keen to win it, but also delighted when we did. So just a little bit of information now about Greenhouse. So we have a really, really clear mission, which we've had since the very, very start. And we've been going for about, I think it's just over 12 years. So our mission is to use the power of communications to drive positive social and environmental change. And that's about really changing the narrative and looking at how we come out of fossil fuels and a negative kind of way of running the economy that exploits people and the planet into a clean, green, healthy and sustainable planet. If you just want to move on to the next slide. So just what that means for our business. So we've had this mission from the start. What it means internally within the business is we work with the pioneers. So we work with entrepreneurs, campaigners, social enterprises that have the vision, ideas and technology to deliver change. And we only work from those. We seek out leaders in each sector. So when we started the business, we actually put a person in the center and we looked at the different areas and the different sectors that would impact life and what we needed to change. And we went after the sectors that were going to create the most difference. So I think we started with food, finance, energy and transport. So we look at those sectors and we literally go and approach the leaders in the sectors to demonstrate and to show them what we can do to help them create change. We are totally 100% focused on a mission. All of the clients we work with are about creating social environmental impact. And we often turn down companies that come to us who are not focused on that or who think of greenwashing. We're incredibly proud to be a B Corp because that just is I guess it's an endorsement and a rigid set of principles that shows to other people and to ourselves that we can keep to, that we put purpose above profit and that we fundamentally believe that business is a force for good. And we've embedded our mission and values in everything we do, including obviously in our articles of association, which makes us feel very confident that they're there forever and that we're all committed to them as a company. We are committed to really high standards. So we've met obviously the highest ethical and environmental standards through the B Corp, but we're committed to constantly improving. And we've just done our 3-year review. And it was a challenge and it's brilliant to do because it really makes you rethink certain processes and it always challenges you to do things better. And then lastly, we're all about delivering impact and scale. So last year, I think we delivered more than 40 campaigns driving change across finance, energy, transport, food and lifestyle. So if you'd like to move on to the next slide. So our vision is a bright and sustainable future where people and planet can thrive together. And we're incredibly optimistic. That's also part of the B Corp movement. We're working towards that change and we're always looking to shift and support other people who want to come alongside us and do that too. And next slide. So our approach is, as I mentioned, we look at the different sectors and we're about to go through this again for 2021, but we literally look at the sectors and we look at where the negative impact is the most and where we can accelerate the change in the biggest way. And then we seek out those pioneers in each sector and we choose those clients that will deliver impact. Interestingly, and this is just something to share during lockdown, we've had, well, I suppose actually we've been growing 30% a year, every year for the last 5 years. Last year, we actually went up to 50% and this year we'll have grown 70%. And we've probably recruited about 7 people during lockdown. And we also have had to have a sort of stop on new business because we couldn't cope with the volume of the new business that we're getting. And I think that's in part due to 2 things. One is the climate emergency, people are recognizing that climate change is really real and it is urgent. And also our kind of reputation and the B Corp status, I think, helps us to stand out, and people come to us because they know they can trust us. And I think part also of our B Corp mentality and sort of focus is that we've really decided right from the beginning that we'll invest in our networks for change. So right from day one, we had like 5 points to our strategy. The 5th point was to invest time and energy into building networks for change. So that means that we do Greenhouse Morning News every morning. It takes up a vast amount of time. And if you calculated the feed time, you'd probably be horrified. But we do Greenhouse Morning News, we do the blog, we do social media in a way that builds networks and celebrates others' achievements. It's not about ourselves. It's about bringing other people on board. It's about sharing best practice. It's about seeking out those influencers that are going to create change. And we do that willingly. It's part of what we do as our responsibility within our green community. And that's part of, I guess, what we feel very strongly about. Do you want to carry on to the next slide? I can't actually remember what's on here. So just a few of the impact highlights. I mean, one of the things I really loved about what Chris was saying is that, yes, you can use really effective comms and PR to really create change. And the idea that we might be able to get this mandatory into people's articles of association or business commitments would be amazing, because the shift would be huge. And we do that sort of work all the time. We're not public affairs people, but we often work with clients and NGOs who have big issues that they want to bring to the fore and create change around. So we have been responsible for shifting the billions from fossil fuels to clean green technology. When we've launched carbon tracker reports, for example, we got on the radar of Mark Carney from Financial Stability Board, Bank of England. And from that, he recognized the need of climate risk, not only just through what we did, but obviously some of it. And people started to shift on their policy towards finance. And we were able to pull out the leaders and the laggards in the finance industry. And we've got, time and time again, we can show how some companies have shifted as a result. We also work to drive the transition to a clean, dynamic and smart energy grid. And we've got lots of examples where we work with technology companies to really raise finance at scale and really raise support within the entire industry to get people with pioneering, interesting ideas that will roll out across the UK at scale. We also work on accelerating sustainable soil farming and ecosystem services. So nature-based solutions, as you've probably heard, is being talked about more and more, but there's more and more evidence also that it's the soil that is critical to the whole of the way we live, breathe, live and eat and live life on Earth. So we also work pro bono with the Soil Alliance because we think it's really important to work with them. We originally worked with Nature Friendly Farmers Network and so on, and we also work with some of the campaigning organizations. So that's one of the areas that we're very interested in. We've also worked with industry across developing fair and sustainable supply chains, supporting collaboration and sharing best practice on just transition. So there's so much climate injustice. When you think about the impact of climate change, it's often on the world's poorest people. So part of our mission is to try to find ways to really bring that to the fore and to fight for people's rights and looking at climate justice. And then also I'm very fascinated and interested, and I think people at the company are, is how we can use the legal framework or the law to protect the earth and those who stand for it. So there's a whole legal discussion around ecocide. There's Client Earth doing amazing work. On the legal side, there's people, we've run a campaign on how to make charitable trustees responsible, not just for delivering shareholder value or fast financial returns, but actually how they can protect the planet at the same time and be responsible for people and planet as well as financial gain. So there's lots of areas, and I just say this as an encouragement really, because we're all great communicators, and if we turn our attention to the issues that we individually really care about, whether that's passion around food stability, or it's particular areas of interest around women's rights, whatever it might be, we have that ability to completely shift. And I came from a background of absolutely zero knowledge on climate change. I used to work at Hill and Knowlton. I used to work at can't even remember where I worked, Countrywide, Portion Novelli, Conan Wolf. So big agencies doing corporate and technology work. I had never done anything on climate change when I started. And I remember going to our first meeting with a journalist, and Lucy Siegel, who is very well known, very, very influential, and thinking like, will she catch me out? Like, I just don't know anything on climate change. I mean, I'm learning as fast as I can. So I don't think you have to know everything to do it as well. If you feel strongly about an issue And if you think you can make a difference, honestly and truly, it's so unbelievably rewarding to put your skills into this area. And we used to hear PR people all the time saying, oh, I'd like to leave PR and go work for a charity because I want to make a difference. Well, actually, you can make a much bigger difference, a really big difference, potentially using the skills that you have on the issues that you care about. Anyway, let's move forward. So I just also wanted to bring around the team mission. This is pictures of some of our team, and each person is photographed around something they really, really care strongly about. So you'll see Will Spragg in the middle there with a Tesla. He's really into EVs. You'll see somebody else at a food market because they're really interested in local food. Will Vowell actually had his first day at the Time Is Now campaign, which was campaigning in Parliament. We had something like 16,000 people coming to Westminster to campaign for change, and it was his first day. He's really interested. He knew all the names of all the MPs, and that was his first day. And working with us, that's his passion. So we kind of really celebrate where people come from and what they care about. And I fundamentally believe, and I think we've seen evidence of that, when you allow people to flourish in the areas that they care about and you celebrate that, it really brings phenomenal commitment, energy, results. I mean, we've seen amazing campaigns coming out of all sorts of people across Greenhouse, and yeah, it's the focus and the passion that's always mentioned when we pitch to clients or when we're talking to new clients. They always mention that's one of the reasons why they come and work or they want to work with us. And move on. So all of this is about building on good foundations, and this is why the B Corporation has been, and being a B Corp is so important to us, and also so brilliant at just grounding us. So anybody that joins us knows and knows that we are grounded in this as well. So it means that fundamentally we put purpose above profit. We give 10% of our time pro bono. We donate 1% of the profit to the planet. We believe fundamentally that business can be a force for good, and we want to show people that. We've embedded our mission in our articles, we adhere to those standards, and we really take care of our staff. So those are kind of the fundamentals, and we have all this sort of environmental and ethical stuff that we have to fulfill through the B Corp. But it means that right at the heart of everything we do, we've got those foundations. So in terms of when we expand what we do, I think we would say we're specialist PR agency, totally focused. Now we've delivered more than 50 campaigns since we last wrote the slides at the beginning, and we keep on increasing. I think we get track record of exceptional results, but that's because we really believe in what we do and we go the extra mile. No longer do we have to sit on a Friday afternoon. I remember in other agencies, like you get, I don't know, you might get a certain amount of time to do a certain client in a certain space, and you've just not got enough time to really put into it. We have much more freedom because we're independently owned. If we choose to put in time pro bono, then we can. The B Corp helps us to demonstrate our progress. We go beyond clients to supporting the whole green movement because we feel it's really important, and we'd also be very open to helping people from the PR industry into this because we also are committed to doing that. We do invest in the network of green influencers, and we're very collaborative, and also actually our clients have become probably our best advocates, and most of them are united in values and purpose, so that really helps. So just looking ahead now to 2021, I think we also had a very brief discussion on what happened in lockdown. And part of being a B Corp in lockdown meant that we were aware that clients could drop budgets. And I think in the first 6 weeks, everybody was very anxious, like what's going to happen? Who's going to drop budgets? Are we going to be okay? And we had some spare capacity within the team. So one of the best things we did is we did a fair share campaign. So we went to fair share and said, look, we can see what's happening. We did have contacts at fair share before. We really want to help. How can we help? So we actually ran a campaign for fair share that was really brilliant, and I think it's possibly won an award. But anyway, it was pro bono. We didn't get paid for it at all. The team loved it. I mean, also we did this thing of swarming where everybody came onto the sell-in and everybody came onto the influencer stuff and social media, and it felt like a really energizing moment where no matter what happened outside, and there was lots of stuff happening outside and people were quite anxious, that there was a real sense of team and going for something. And we also approached Women's Aid. We didn't actually end up doing that at the moment, but I think that whole thing of being something that is outside of just making profit and just worrying about yourselves was really brilliant. And that really came to the fore during lockdown. And I think that energized the team and really helped us move forward. So I think that was kind of interesting. But looking ahead, I just suppose I want to pause now and think about 2021. We are thinking about ripping up the rule book, and we've got something that we're calling December to Remember, where we're going to take a pause in the business and we're going to really think carefully about how we want to play and where we want to be next year, because I think we've been slightly overwhelmed by new business, and we're kind of pedaling to keep up, and we've actually put a stop to new business now. And what we want to try and go back to is our roots of thinking, if this is our mission, and we've got the most fantastic year, as Chris was mentioning, we've got Biden in power, we've got the European Green Deal, we've got COP26. I mean, how amazing! What a big opportunity we've got. And I think we want to rethink at a company level, like what's our personal mission, what's our team missions, and what's our company mission, like reconfirm that for ourselves. I mean, just refresh it, and then think about, where do we really want to be? Who do we want to work for? And what's going to create the most impact over the next year? And I think the wonderful thing about that is it takes it away from, oh, I've got to go and win some new business, or, oh, I want to go and do this. It takes it away from being about you, about the personality of the company and the company itself. It takes it into, how can we best use our skills? How can we be really useful? How can we best use our skills? Who should we approach to say, look, we see what you're doing is brilliant. And this is what we do if we do go for new business. We see what you're doing is brilliant. We could really help you scale this. Can we talk to you? And that's a very comfortable way of doing new business, because you're not selling yourself. And I suppose what I put here in this kind of slide is, what we do counts as PR people. It really, really counts. And we've got the climate emergency. There is no planet B. It's for our children, our children's children, and we really need to wake up and act now. And when you look at what's really happening, if you allow yourself to look at it and feel it, it is really dramatic on climate change. I mean, we are into the feedback loops, which nobody ever predicted, and it is really, really grim what's coming. So, it's very easy to gloss over that and not feel that. And I think it's really important as individuals, as parents, as, just people, to actually look at what's happening and really feel it. Because if you allowed yourself to feel it, we'd all be doing what we're doing, because honestly, we've got so much at stake. I heard somebody talking last week about the seventh mass extinction, and that 70% of life will be left, and that might not be humans. Anyway, we won't go there, but there's quite a lot to consider. Anyway, but what we do, I mean, the positive, which we like to focus on, is what we do really counts. And as PR people, we've got such a brilliant opportunity. We actually did, just as an aside, we did the PR for the climate strikes, for the youth climate strike. We did it for the I think it's the largest ever global climate strike. We were behind the bus with all the students. Best day of my life. I mean, also what was also so brilliant is that I watched somebody who'd grown up from being a grad to an account manager running it. I turned up and she had a clipboard. She had 8 people from Greenhouse with green t-shirts. You could see them everywhere. We had Channel 4, we had every news station there. It was so exciting, and I wasn't even involved. I was just watching. I mean, I was just helping. I was a helper, but it was so exciting to be part of something that had so much energy. And when I think about what we could do next as Greenhouse, one of the things that we're going to be talking about this month is, how do we take on more and more climate activists, youth activists, and actually empower them and kind of train them up in comms so that they're brilliant communicators and that they can go off. And I guess initially I always felt really close that Greenhouse, I don't want anybody to leave. But now I'm actually thinking it's okay to leave, because actually we can train people up, they can move on, they can go to do something absolutely brilliant. And I still don't want to believe, but that's a much better way of thinking about it when they do, So part of our commitment, maybe in December, that we talk about is, how do we recruit in climate activists, help them, train them, support them, either to go off and do what they want to do or be part of Greenhouse. And I think that's one of the things that we're going to think about. So just move on to the next slide. So planning for 21. First of all, I guess we've just covered this. We're seeing the enormous impact of the climate emergency. We're also seeing the opportunity with new climate commitments and COP26. We're ripping up the rule book on planning. We're regrouping on a mission, unleashing the potential and passion within our team, understanding and finding the sectors where we can have most impact, and scaling and growing to meet the challenge. And by the way, I would like to say that, it's not without fear. Like, I don't know whether you're all really bold and really out there. I mean, I think I'm I think I've been a risk taker, and I'm always excited by the opportunity, but I never wanted a company. I can tell you that much. We were a network of freelancers initially. Then I said, well, we'll only go to 12. Then I said, well, we discussed it, and as a team, we said, well, we'll only go to 30. Anyway, we're now 36. I mean, who knows where we're going to go to. It's not about the size for us, it's about the impact. And I think as long as we're needed, and as long as there's a role for us, which I think there is, then I think we will probably grow to meet that challenge. And just some of the exciting things that we're doing, for example, is, and again, we're doing this bit pro bono, is I'm working with a group of really influential women which is just a complete pleasure and honor to do. But we are fighting, or we are challenging the COP26 presidency, because it's all men running COP26, and isn't that a travesty? I mean, so anyway, we are launching a letter. We're doing a whole campaign. We're launching it with media. We're talking to lots of different politicians to support it, and celebrities. But so that's just one thing we're doing in the next 2 weeks, is we're really challenging why on earth we've got COP26 leadership team of all men, when there is so much evidence to say that actually when women are on board, A, they understand climate and they're able to affect behavior change, B, they're brilliant, and we've got so many women climate leaders, it's unbelievable. And also there's even an obligation from the UNFCCC that you have to have gender balance on negotiations. So it's a travesty, but that's kind of what we do. If we see something and we're involved in something, we will go for it. But that's also part of the excitement. That's where we get our energy from. Okay, so moving on. I think I might be at the end. Oh, yes. So I guess I wanted to leave you with, we're always stronger together. We welcome more PR people into this space. I mean, the more, the better. We don't see you as competition. We see you as welcome people. And if you want anything, information or knowledge, or I don't know, if you want to meet us, then we're always open to that. But I guess I'd like to ask, how can you use your skills for good? What could you personally do that will make a difference? And what would that mean to you if you did? End of. That's the end. So open to questions.
Well, thank you so much for that, Anna. That was inspirational and fascinating to see how your agency has evolved, and also the principles with which it sort of tackles and these challenges. Absolutely inspirational. I think I've got a quick question for you around this, because it's one that we've been asked a couple of times as well. You know, if you were faced with a traditionally bad performer organization, but with good, clear intent to change, or a good organization, but with slightly performative desire to kind of be seen to be doing good, which one would you pick as a client?
Oh, so I guess probably the former. But we have like a whole set of criteria. It's really interesting, and I think it's really great to have it written down, because sometimes you're pulled in one direction by a new client trying to come in, and you're not absolutely sure. So we have a set of criteria, and then we have 2 or 3 people within the industry that we go and ask for a second opinion, in terms of sometimes it looks really good, but it's not underneath. And but I think we have just started working with our first company, which is Wärtsilä, which is an energy company who does have gas peaking plants. And we had a huge debate internally whether we should do it. But the reality of what they're doing is they've got this whole data modeling set, and they've got massive ambition on renewables. And so what they're doing at scale on renewables is so far outweighs the negative side that after much consultation, we've decided to go with them. But that's the first of its kind. We have been approached by lots of other people, like Green Week, sponsored by Tesco and EDF, and people that we've just absolutely said no to. We quite regularly turn them down. But I think somebody who's genuinely open and interested, and it usually comes when there's a really good leader. I find that if there's somebody who has a real vision, and he or she is making it happen throughout the company, then I think that often is something really attractive, because you can see the rationale for change, and you can also see some of the evidence for change already. But no, it is a tricky one. And I think more often than not, we feel like, and I don't know whether this is awful to say, but we feel like there's lots of big agencies out there who have the potential to do brilliant things. And we have that positioning of working with pioneers and entrepreneurs. So we keep it tight, essentially, because there's plenty of other people to do all those jobs, and we'd rather be stuck in a great place where people have lots of energy, ideas, and reasons to change.
Andy's asked, actually, and this is sort of leads on to it really. Do you have any top tips for sort of spotting greenwashing, Anna, when you're faced with someone over the opposite side of the board table who sounds great, but sort of alarm bells are ringing?
That's a really, really interesting question. What would I do? I'm always very interested in people's personal story. But also there's always a couple of questions that you can ask to catch them out. And if you know the industry well enough, that's probably the way I would do it. And also I'd ask I mean, most people have an impact report, or if somebody's serious about it now, people will actually have something in writing that shows and demonstrates their commitment. So I'd always ask to see that. But it is really hard, but it's more about really getting under the skin of who they are, what their vision is, and trying to get to know, I guess, trying to get to know the content of what they're doing by really interrogating it. But it is hard.
One of the things that you mentioned is quite, and it sort of got me thinking, even when we talked earlier on this afternoon as well, was this idea of a more community-driven PR industry, because we're sort of, I guess, a little bit sort of traditionally known sometimes as being quite competitive, awards, etc., etc., etc. One of the questions that Jordan's asked actually is, have you ever considered offering training to larger agencies to actually help them deliver environmental comms consultancy? And then I'm just going to add a final bit onto this to sort of, so that's part one of the question from Jordan. Then part two from me is, do you think more can be done in this sort of collective spirit that you've described for sort of PR to kind of have a greater impact on some of these challenges?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, I suppose first things first, yes, we have thought about it. I have done a little bit. And I would definitely consider more, but I think we're just so busy at the moment that it's hard to find the time to be able to do that. But if somebody invited us in, yes, we would definitely go in and do something. So, and that applies to big agencies. And then I can't remember, the other one was...
do you think there should be a more collective spirit to sort of...
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely. I mean, we actually get, if somebody comes into climate, like we just had Seahorse win an award and they came into the industry, like we'll go out of our way to say welcome. Is there if you ever want to meet, if you want to always, yes, I mean, we're all individuals and we're part of a company, but we don't have to compete. There's so much opportunity out there and there's such a big job to do that it would seem crazy to be worried about competition on climate change for me.
Brilliant. Excellent. Anna, thank you so much for your talk and for going through those questions. Really, really inspirational stuff. Fascinated to see what happens with Greenhouse in 2021. Extraordinary to hear how that transpires in terms of challenging that COP presidency, and it was an incredibly important point to be made, and some change that really needs to be put into action there. Thank you so much for joining us, Anna.
Thank you for asking.
Guys, that actually brings us to the conclusion of our last event of the year. I've got to say, as chair of the B Corp group, and with my own agency, Don't Cry Wolf, being a newcomer to the B Corp world, but very, very pleased to be a part and parcel of this. I would have loved to have done a few more bits and pieces. I think there was a few distractions along the way in 2020, but we did put on a few good events. We are going to be creating a new agenda for the coming year. This is an incredibly important year, as we've heard from Chris and Anna. So would absolutely welcome any thoughts. If you do want to get in touch, please do drop me a line at john@don'tcrywolf.com, or get in touch with Kyrie at the PRCA. Otherwise, I thank you all for joining us this evening and for sticking with us over the course of this year and coming along to these events. Really, really tremendous discussion tonight. Have a wonderful evening and all the very, very best. Thank you.